Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've learnt from running practices for Zizaran's upcoming Gauntlet race. So the Gauntlet race, if you've not been following, is an event that's being run by possibly one of the highest profile streamers in the game, and it's a hardcore solo self-found private league that has the following mods in play. Monsters have 40% more life, 20% increased monster damage, 20% increased monster movement, attack, and cast speed. Monsters fire 2 additional projectiles. Players have neg 40 to all resists, and monsters deal 30% extra physical damage as each of fire, cold, and lightning. So needless to say, this is Path of Exile on hard mode. But it's not quite as brutal as it might sound. There's a lot of these difficult things can be mitigated by a combination of careful play and simply knowing what the biggest threats in the game are. So I wanted to go through through various parts of the game and discuss the tips and tricks that I've found and the areas that I think you should fear, as well as the areas I think you should respect. So firstly, I want to break down the zones in each of the acts into 3 categories. The first one is zones you should fear, like the coast, like the Weaver's Chambers. These are the zones that are the biggest run killers of all. These are the ones where you're going to be facing a very high chance of being killed if you're not extremely careful. The second is zones that I think you should respect. So zones you should respect are zones where there's a fair amount of monster damage, and I'm going to name the Climb as an example here. They're not nearly as deadly as zones like the coast, but they are the hardest. They're the zones that are unexpectedly hard. And then everything else is zones that you can play as normal, although you do still need to be a little bit careful. There's still plenty of dangerous stuff going on in the game, but in those zones, but they're not nearly as terrifying as places like the coast. So, I want to break up the first 3 acts in this video, but also give some general overall tips. And I want to give the overall tips first. The first note is that the most dangerous thing in the game is physical spells. So this is when monsters use abilities that are similar to the player skill Ethereal Knives. These will rip you to shreds. And the reason for that is monsters dealing 30% extra physical damage as fire, cold, and lightning. This really scales that up a lot, and additionally a lot of these skills scale with monsters fire additional projectiles as well. So essentially they just get a lot out of the various mods. It is very easy to get yourself into a terrible situation, and to name another zone where this can happen, the Crypt in Act 7, very easy to get yourself into a dangerous situation where the first Ethereal Knives hits you, inflicts a chill or a freeze, and shocks you, and then the second and third ones finish you off. And of course, because there's 20% increased monster cast speed and 20% increased monster damage, this can happen much faster than you expect. So, for this reason, the hardest encounter in the entirety of the campaign is actually the Weaver in the Weaver's Chambers in Act 2. And there's several other zones where there's a lot of physical spellcasters are amongst some of the nastiest things you'll find. The second note is that you should consider different auras to usual. Now, you'll notice here that as I'm holding control, you see I'm running Arctic Armor linked to Elemental Proliferation as a defensive aura, and additionally I have Vitality running as well. Vitality has been buffed and grants a huge amount of life regeneration. You'll notice here that I'm gaining 185.1 life per second on this character. This is a character that's the end of Act 7, and so essentially I am gaining something like 7% of my life regenerated. For comparison, Slayer Leech is I think is like 20%. So it's a good percentage of Slayer Leech, except it's always online. Vitality is now really good. The other aura that you should consider that you would never play in softcore is Purity of Elements. Purity of Elements is something that will really help you keep alive early in the game when you're having trouble getting your resistances to work out. Of course, these are temporary solutions. You probably do not want to plan on running these auras at endgame. You want to use them and then get rid of them when you can. The third note is that deaths are going to happen. and you should plan around this. Don't vendor gear that you've just because you've out-leveled it. If you pick up a really good amulet that's level 36 required, and then later on you hit 64 and you get something that's just better because level 64 amulets can just roll so many more stats that they can be better than that really good 36 one you had. Don't vendor the level 36 one. Stick it in a stash tab, and then if your current character that's at endgame meets an untimely death, then simply equip the level 36 one on your next character. This goes double for leveling uniques. It's tempting especially for softcore players, to pick up something like a Goldrum and think, oh cool, that's alchemy shards. Actually, no, it's not. It is a ticket to turbocharge your next character's leveling, should you need it. The next note that I want to make is that monsters having Onslaught means you have less time to react than usual, and it's much tighter than 20% too. So if a monster's skill sort of winds up, so the monster starts making some sort of animation, and you know that you've got 1.25 seconds, so 1,250 milliseconds, until it fires an attack that is going to hit an area of the screen. In normal gameplay, it might take you 250 milliseconds to realize that the animation has started, and 300 milliseconds to get out of the danger area. So that means that essentially you have 700 milliseconds of grace time in there. 250 to realize what's going on, 300 to get out of the way, and then 700 to actually start moving out of the way, and that makes up your 1250. However, with monsters having Onslaught, you've only got 1000 milliseconds, but your reaction time is still going to be 250 milliseconds, and the time it takes you to get out of the way is still going to be 300 milliseconds. So for that reason, you're actually only looking at 450 milliseconds, not 700. This is really sketchy, and it's something that you need to keep in mind all the time. It's not just 20%. It's not just that monsters are 20% faster than they normally are. It's that they still hit the area in the same time, and you still take all your time to react. This means that there's a number of skills I consider not viable in this league, and those are the ones that require precise player timing. Things like Blade Flurry and Divine Ire, that take a lot of charging up and then unleashing at strategically important times. These skills I think are going to perform really badly because there's less of a window where you can say, oh, Brutus is facing me and he's just started the animation for something. I'm gonna let this Blade Flurry finish charging, release it, then immediately move out of the way. You've got less ability to do that, and so for that reason, I don't suggest using those skills at all. The fifth note is coward portals on bosses. Use them. There's not much really to say here. If you're fighting a boss, put a portal up. If you run into a bit of trouble, just make a beeline to the portal and get out. Then, once you're out, come back in with your flasks refreshed, come back in and just wait on your invulnerability timer until it's safe to move, and then hit I to bring up your inventory and make your first action while breaking invulnerability the casting of a new portal scroll. This is particularly important on bosses like Innocence, although you won't encounter him in the first 3 acts we're talking about here, because of his bullet hell. Now in softcore, I'm quite happy to dodge Innocence's bullet hell. In hardcore, it's something else entirely, especially when you factor in that you might have latency that you don't realize. I have no concerns about my ability to dodge Innocence's bullet hell if every projectile is exactly where it looks to be on my screen, and if I have a teleport move skill. But if what's appearing on my screen is actually 150 milliseconds out of sync with the server, then I have a lot of doubt in my ability to dodge Innocence's bullet hell. And really, I don't want to find out that I had 150 milliseconds of latency by losing my character. I want to find that out beforehand, and I want to play under the assumption that I might just have that latency there. Okay, so let's go through the zones. Firstly, Act 1. What zone should you fear here? You should fear the coast. How should you navigate? Why should you fear this zone? It's because of the projectiles that are lobbed, the flaming projectiles that are lobbed by the cannibal monsters. Those things are terrifying when they're throwing 3 of them instead of 1. My first attempt at a trial run of this league, I went into the coast and I thought, okay, I need to be stronger, so I'm going to slowly, methodically clear this zone out. I'm going to kill everything in it, and I'm going to do it slowly, carefully, and methodically. That's what was my thought pattern. I died 3 times trying to do that, and I'm still not confident that if I went back there on a melee character now that I would do any better. I ended up, my second character attempt was not a melee character, so it was much easier. But I still would suggest that the way to handle a coast is not to slowly, methodically clear it. It is just simply to run like a maniac from Lion Eye's Watch all the way through the coast, tag the waypoint on your way, then duck into the mudflats, or duck into the tidal island. Whatever you do, get out of this zone as quickly as you can. Then you'll be level 2 and you'll be in the tidal island or the mudflats. In either case, you're okay. However, the mudflats is on my list of zones to respect. The mudflats has the rowers that charge you. You want to be very vaguely aware of the areas you haven't explored yet on the minimap, and that'll be the areas where rowers are starting to charge at you from. So let's say that I have explored all of this area, and I'm wanting to go into this area next. As I'm walking up here, I'll be aware that the rowers in this area of the screen are becoming aware of me. So, any of them that will charge directly at me. So what I will do is I won't just keep walking this way, I'll zigzag along every now and again as well. This will ensure that it'll juke out those rowers that are trying to charge me. They'll instead charge to where I was. I will then dispatch them when they're not able to charge anymore. And you want to generally go through this zone trying to be careful not to be charged by any of the rowers. You don't want a single rower charge to connect with you. You'll probably survive it if they do, but it's good practice to try to ensure that they don't. Tidal Island's not so bad. Hailrake I thought was going to be really scary and he wasn't. However, you do want to be quite careful of his Snowbolt and his Glacial Cascade. You will want to dodge those skills, but it's not devastating if you stuff up and get tagged by them occasionally. Mudflats is otherwise fine. Other zones that you should respect. You should respect the climb. Normally a bit of a joke in the game. The climb has that annoying archer, undead archer, that will do. He doesn't one shot, but he will inflict chills, shocks, and ignites with his first hit. And therefore, you want to try and make sure that when you encounter him, basically just run. Otherwise, that's Act 1 for you. The other thing that should be said is that the quest that you complete by getting access to the Submerged Passage is the quest that enables you to buy Decoy Totem in town. If you're on a Witch or a Shadow, you can't buy it. And if you're on a Witch or a Shadow, you should probably level a different character. The Ranger is really easy to level to this point, and have them pick up Decoy Totem for you. Decoy Totem will be absolutely godly when it comes to making Brutus a joke, and also to making Merveil a joke. Brutus and Merveil are quite dangerous if you don't use Decoy Totem, but if you do use Decoy Totem and you just keep recasting it, you should have little trouble with them. Now that's at least assuming you're very familiar with their normal mechanics. The last thing I want to point out is resistances. Your resistances start at -40, and that's what makes the coast so deadly. You will have, from the very beginning of the game, you will have access to the crafting bench's suffixes. Not the ones you see here, but these ones: 16 to 20% fire resist, 16 to 20% cold, and 16 to 20% to lightning resist. You will want to use these extensively. Use them on your gear in order to make sure that you can get through the dangers that are posed by Act 1. If in doubt, prioritize cold resist over everything else, because Merveil is, well, for physical hits, that will mitigate the most dangerous elemental ailment, which is chill or freeze, and for Merveil, it will mitigate both the damage she does and her ability to chill or freeze you, which then locks you in place so that you get killed by something else. So for that reason, you want to be using Decoy Totem. You want to use Decoy Totem to make Vaal easier, but you also want to have your cold resistance up as well. The last thing that needs to be said is Heist shenanigans. You will be able to run a quest. Once you pick up your first rogue markers and head to the rogue encampment, you will be able to pick up your first quest heist. This quest heist is level 2 and can really be like this feels like an exploit, but it's not considered one by GGG. You can basically intentionally fail this heist, this quest heist. Just go in there, loot a few of the chests, loot as many of them as you can, don't get the objective, and exit. When you do this, you can then pick up a new copy of the heist just by talking to the quest giver, and repeat this as often as you want. Level 2, all of the loot that you get from this will be level 2, but whilst this precludes the more powerful crafting items from dropping, say for instance, I think Orbs of Alchemy have a minimum drop level of 8, Chaos Orbs 12, Exalts 35, Mirrors of Calandra 35, and so on. You will, however, be able to get caster weapons that are incredible. Level 2 caster weapons are actually really, really good, because it is at item level 2 that the +1 to the level of all fire spell skills, +1 to the level of all physical spell skill gems, etc., that those mods become available. And because there's so much less in the mod pool at level 2, you actually have quite a high chance to roll them. So for this reason, if you're playing a caster, you should see it as absolutely mandatory to farm one of these here, to farm one of them for each of your 2 weapon slots, and to do so while you're in Act 1. Additionally, you should be buying all of the contracts that Faustus is selling, and then running them when you're about 10 levels higher than the contract is. And that will put you in a powerful position to then, just power up your characters and get yourself some really good gear. There's also a bunch of vendor recipes that can help. I will link the page to vendor recipe discussion on the Path of Exile wiki, because there's just too many of them to discuss here. So, Act 2. What zone should you respect? None of them. All the zones except for one are pretty easy in Act 2. And what zone should you fear? You should absolutely be terrified by the Weaver's Chambers. The Weaver's Chambers is absolutely brutal. I believe it's the hardest zone in the entirety of the campaign. And that is because the boss, the Weaver, is so brutal there. In terms of strategies for fighting the Weaver, the first option you've got is to simply outlevel a zone by quite a bit, and to try and always keep the Weaver distracted by having him fighting your Decoy Totem. The second thing that needs to be said with the Weaver is that being in close proximity to the Weaver, counterintuitively, is actually safer than being at long range. If you were at long range, then the Weaver will fire a projectile skill that functions very similarly to the player skill Ethereal Knives. This definitely one-shots you through 700 life. I have video of that happening to me. At least I have video of it happening once. And then I went back in with the same mods in play and did it a couple more times, and it seemed like it was not a critical hit that got me through the 700 health. It seems like he was able to replicate that time and time again. So given that a non-crit was killing me through, I think the exact amount that I had was 650 health and 60 energy shield at the time. Given he's able to one-shot through that, then tanking that is not something that I think is reasonable at all. You want to have the Weaver distracted with a Decoy Totem, but mostly you just want to kill him fast. This is a fight where actually you want to take some of the softcore strategies around going Glass Cannon and consider using them in hardcore. Ultimately, as I said, there are 2 options you've got for the Weaver. The first one is, as soon as you get to Act 2, make a beeline to the Weaver and just roll a dice straight away. The second one is do the Weaver as late as possible, after building up your character considerably in Heist to get more gear, through doing everything else you've got access to at that point, which is basically the Wetlands is the highest tier zone that you can get into at this point of the game. And just get your character as powerful as you can, maybe be even level 24, 25, have a bunch of life nodes and the like, then go and do the Weaver. Either way, I'm going to leave that decision up to you. Just be aware that it is a terrifyingly difficult fight. Next, we have Act 3, where there's a couple of things that we want to discuss there. Firstly, zones to respect. The first one that I want to say is something that's a bit of an oddball, and that is Vaal Side Areas. Vaal Side Areas should be respected. In fact, some of them should be feared. If you don't know the boss's mechanics very well, then don't attempt these. If you do know the bosses very well, then go in, work out, ascertain which boss you have in that Vaal Side area. Then before you engage them, think long and hard. How is each of these map mods going to affect this boss? And the short version is, if it is the Sunburst Queen, do not engage. I attempted the Sunburst Queen, and I was really overleveled, thought I was looking like really strong, and she killed me with one of her projectile barrages, which the first shot from it hit me, stunned and froze me. The second shot killed me, and there was a third, fourth, fifth projectile that also were going to hit me as well. So that's absolutely and utterly brutal, and you don't want to get hit by that. The other zones that I think you should respect in here are the Sceptre of God has powerful monsters, both the normal Scepter and the upper Scepter. The Imperial Gardens has a few nasty monsters in it, and the Ebony Barracks has Gravicius. Gravicius, like the Act 1 Coast cannibals, throws flaming torches at you that leave burning ground behind. They're really nasty because he throws more of them and you have worse fire resistance. However, with Gravicius, you probably do want to kill him because he gates a lot of skill gems. And the best way to do that is again going to be Decoy Totem abuse. You want him fighting your Decoy Totem while you're fighting his back. However, there is a zone to fear as well, and that zone is Lunaris Temple Level 2. I'm going to showcase this on a higher level character that is miles past this point in progression. Just going to jump into Lunaris 2 now. And what I will do is showcase what you should be scared of. It is these Tentacled Miscreations. Now, they're not able to really do much damage to me at the moment. That's for a couple of reasons. The first one is, as you can see, I'm running the Vitality Aura, and I've just got one that's way too high in level for this zone. The second one, though, is that I've got more life, and that means that all that they're able to do in the way of status effects is ignite me. They can't hit hard enough to inflict a shock. They can't hit hard enough to inflict a freeze or a chill. However, if I was at an appropriate level, I'd probably have about 1,000 hit points here instead of having 2,600. And at that point, these things would be sporadically chilling me, they would be igniting me, and I would not be regenerating this life anywhere near as fast. For that reason, I would need to be handling them very, very differently to how I'm handling them here. Here I can do whatever I want. You know, I can just throw a skeleton there and it'll one-shot them all, and we're all happy, everything is dead. That's all great. But when you're at level, what you need to do is play not really line of sight. It's not line of sight games. It's a different type of careful play that you're going to want to use. And I want to demonstrate this now because I think it's easier to say it than to explain it. The key thing is that you want to have them committing to shooting where you are, but then you want to be not where they're firing at by the time they're attacking you. So here you'll see that I'm continually moving around them. And what that does is it means that they're committing to one direction. So unfortunately it looks like this zombie has ended the fight early. But if these were still alive, if I'm standing here, they will start committing to firing at me. But by the time that they've actually started firing, I'll have moved here. Once I've moved here, they're going to be locked into an extended animation firing at me. And at that point, I can then just duck away. I can then just make a couple of attacks while they're still animation locked. And they can then hit where I am, or where I was, whilst my attacks are actually killing them. So that's the way that I would handle them. Piety herself is not so bad, but the one thing I will say is that this is the first zone where it's really important to have 75 to all resistances. And again, you'll be wanting to use those crafting bench methods to get your resistances up, and then that should put you into a good position. The other thing that is a zone that is much more serious in this league than it is normally is the docks. So the docks has the silly Voidbearer monsters. I'll just jump in there and find a couple and demonstrate what I'm talking about here. Not these monsters here. Notice how they've got multiple projectiles, or they had multiple projectiles until they met a rude little incident there with some zombies. They're firing off multiple projectiles, and each of those projectiles is dealing fire damage. Those projectiles are coming faster than they normally would. This is a dangerous combination, and it means that if you go in there without 75% fire resistance, you can get shredded. So, in short, the zones to respect in here, in Act 3, you want to respect the docks, you want to respect the Ebony Barracks, the Imperial Gardens, the Sceptre of God, and I believe you want to respect the library as well. I didn't go in there on this training run, and you want to absolutely fear Lunaris too. Anyway, that's all I got for Acts 1, 2, and 3. I do want to quickly state something about the Labyrinth, though, because that's something that you get access to at the end of Act 3, and it is my feeling that the Labyrinth is more of a DPS test than a survival test in this league. The reason for that is that the Labyrinth, with Izaro's, well, not the Izaro, but the Goddess of Justice, fires off mortars that raise a whole bunch of undead that then swarm you. Those minions will be triplicated with the additional projectiles effect. And the biggest danger when fighting Izaro isn't so much Izaro one-shotting you, but it's you losing control of the encounter because those adds spawn out of control. For that reason, I suggest that you hold off on the Labyrinth until you are confident that you can one or two shot monsters that are level 33. At that point, I think it's much more realistic to go and do the Labyrinth. Even if you end up having to take a little while with Izaro, Izaro is not that hard, at least I think for anyone that's running in the Gauntlet event, you're probably familiar enough with Izaro's patterns that you're confident in doing the fight without Izaro ever hitting you. If that's not the case, then by all means overlevel a bit more. Maybe come and do Izaro when you are just about to do Innocence or just about to do Katava. But if you're very confident with the Izaro fight, then just come in there when you feel like you can confidently 1 or 2 tap monster level 33 trash, and then at that point it's just a formality. Go in there, go up to Izaro, you'll be able to rip him pretty much to shreds anyway, and then when he does spawn those extra monsters, you'll be able to maintain control of the battle and then take on Izaro more. Anyways, that's all I got on this one. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. I intend to cover strategies for the mid-game, which will be either Acts 4, 5, 6, 7, or maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then early endgame strategies, which will be 9, 10, may include 8. We'll have 9 and 10 in it, and we'll also discuss very early mapping. But comments and questions definitely welcome. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one.